Talk about playing one-handed. Personally, Cassandra just reminds me of my mom too much. What are we talking about? Ah yes, assassins. Many of you might be familiar with Ubisoft's hit game Assassin's Creed. You know, one of them. But even though Odyssey is objectively the best one, the original games flashing back to the Crusades actually explore what it means to be an assassin. Turns out this game is inspired by historical events and characters. You know, the historical event of being the only guy speaking English without an accent in 12th century Jerusalem.
Silence is just another form of assent. Have you nothing better to do?
But let's back up a little. Independent of any video games, what is an assassin, really? A person specifically willing to risk their life to kill? Any killer? It is just the word for murderer in French, and Portuguese, and Italian. Google gives us two definitions. A person who murders an important person for political or religious reasons, or a member of the Nizari branch of Ismaili Muslims at the time of the Crusades, when the newly established sect ruled part of northern Persia. They were renowned military fanatics and were popularly reputed to use hashish before going on murder missions. Now there's a lead. Like any world religion, Islam has many different communities of interpretation. Crucially, the differences between them are often concerned with who the legitimate spiritual successor to the Prophet Muhammad should be. In Shia Islam, leadership is limited to the Ahl al-Bayt, or the people of the house, beginning with Muhammad, his daughter Fatima, his cousin/son-in-law Ali, and their sons Hassan and Hussein. In Sunni Islam, the first three caliphs are considered to be rightly guided, and so everyone can assume a position of leadership if they are also rightly guided, so you don't have to be a member of Muhammad's bloodline. These are obviously just some broad strokes, but it helps us place the Nizari, who are themselves a branch of the Ismailis. These days, the Ismailis make up a number of religious minorities across like 25 countries all over the world. With several million members, they make up a large variety of ethnic groups and many languages. I promise we'll get to weed and murder soon. We cut to the Crusades. The Crusaders had extensive military and diplomatic encounters with the Syrian Nizari Ismailis from the opening decades of the 6th/12th century. Military and diplomatic encounters? Is that what the kids are calling it these days? You know what the Crusades were about. But it was not until the second half of the 12th century that Occidental travelers, diplomatic emissaries, and chroniclers of the Crusades began to write about these strange sectarians, the followers of a mysterious old man of the mountain, who were designated by them in different European languages by variant forms of the term assassins. The word assassin comes from the Arabic word hashashi, turned into hashashin in European transcriptions. This was a derogatory term that other Muslims used for the Nizari, but apparently it didn't literally refer to the consumption of marijuana. It was more along the lines of person of lax morals. Welcome to Loser's Creed, the more historically accurate version of Stoner's Creed. I want to issue a formal apology to the global Ismaili community. Although there's someone else who could stand to do that, a lot of the weird, overblown, and straight-up fantastical assassin legends were culminated and popularized by none other than Marco Polo, including but not limited to the training legend, the paradise legend, the hashish legend, and the Deathleap legend. Oh, Ubisoft, you're gonna make me feel all cultured when I sit on a public bench to escape my pursuers. Anyway, in Marco Polo's telling, the man of the mountain was raising and training local peasants to fierce devotion. He owned some stronghold situation with fountains of milk and honey and everything nice. And also, there were tons of hot babes there. What? A private squadron of nubile girls? A never-before-seen take on Islam by an Occidental traveler. Marco Polo goes on to describe how at some point the old man of the mountain would knock his disciples out and take them to this paradise. After getting to spend a few days there, they would be discreetly carried out. And having known and lost paradise, they were willing to do basically anything to get it back, willing to risk even the most suicidal assignments. According to John of Joinville, a medieval French chronicler, a buddy of St. Louis once got to talk to the Nizari Ismaili chief and reported back that when anyone is killed by the command or in service of his superior, the soul of the person so killed then goes into another body of higher rank and enjoys more comforts than before, which is why they all want to die in service so bad, I guess. It's important to stress, as always, that these accounts come to us from behind, like, 7 corners. Marco Polo admittedly didn't observe any of this himself. He just wrote stuff down he heard as a teenager passing through Persia to wherever else he was visiting. And don't get me started on John of Joinville, because everything he's giving us on Assassins seems to be limited to a side character in his Crusades fanfiction. It seems that the true history of Assassins just isn't as clear-cut as we'd like. Although, from everything I got, it definitely seems like the sort of secret society you'd want to make a video game about. Deathleap! Whee! Although it's important to stress that one of the reasons why we know so little is because Christian crusaders were unsurprisingly disinterested in engaging with Islam in a neutral manner. Christian Europe was alarmed by the expanding fortunes of the Muslims and their military conquests. Islam was to become a lasting trauma for Europe, an expression of the other. This fundamentally negative perception of Islam was retained for almost 1,000 years, well into the 17th century when the Ottoman Turks still represented a serious military threat to Christendom and Europe. For several centuries, European perceptions of Islam were essentially rooted in fear and ignorance, resulting in a highly distorted and absurd image in Western minds. You'll also be interested to learn that the sort of suicide missions that Europeans dreamed up motivations for are not, and have never been, exclusive to any one demographic. Riaz Hassan, emeritus professor in the Department of Sociology at Flinders University, wrote in 2009 that though religion can play a vital role in recruiting and motivating potential future suicide bombers, the driving force is not religion, but a cocktail of motivations including politics, humiliation, revenge, retaliation, and altruism. He points out that, typically, suicide bombers are psychologically normal and are deeply integrated into social networks and emotionally attached to their national communities. So, enjoy Stoner's Creed with a grain of salt, and remember to appreciate the rich history whose adaptation has single-handedly convinced me that I can climb any building if it has any architectural feature whatsoever.